A Chihuahua, 7 de la mañana, 19 minutos 42 segundos, tiempo del centro de México. Sigue temblando un poquitito, pero pues vamos a tomarlo con una gran tranquilidad. Vamos a esperar un segundo para poder hablar.
Mexico City is the largest city in all of North America. It's not just the capital of Mexico, but it was the capital of Spain's American Empire and of the Aztecs. About 230 miles inland, Mexico City sits in one of the most volcanically and seismically active regions in the world. And the city feels these quakes especially hard. When an earthquake shakes water-saturated soil, the soil itself can suddenly behave like a liquid. This is called liquefaction.
The city's watery Aztec past is never very far beneath the surface.
The historic center of Mexico City is known as the Zocalo. Each side measures 240 meters long, making it big enough to fit over 10 American football fields. And planted in the center is a giant Mexican flag, with the image of an eagle perched on a cactus with a serpent in its mouth. This was a vision given to an outcast group looking for a home, the Mexica, also known as the Aztecs.
You can see it on their flag, on their coins, in all sorts of national symbolism.
And that is because Huitzilopochtli, their kind of ethnic deity, said, when you see the eagle light on the cactus, you'll know that's where you settle. And it was on the island.
That vision led to the birth of Tenochtitlan.
It used to be called Mexico Tenochtitlan. That Mexico has turned into the Mexico that we know today. So the heart of all of Mexico is Mexico Tenochtitlan in a lot of ways.
This map shows what the Valley of Mexico would have looked like, covered by Lake Texcoco. And this is key to understanding modern Mexico City.
Oh, the lake is huge, and it was about 100 kilometers across. I mean, really big, but shallow. And so during the dry season, it kind of separates into like 5 distinct lakes.
Barbara wrote this book, The Death of Aztec Tenochtitlan, The Life of Mexico City, and was kind enough to help me with this video. Tenochtitlan.
Uh-huh.
Tenochtitlan.
That's the pure Nahuatl pronunciation.
And these beautiful recreations of the city, these were made by Dutch artist Thomas Cole.
I kind of chose the route of being kind of an artistic type of programmer or a programmer type of artist. There's a balance between that we call technical artists in the industry. The project that I did about Mexico City, it was a hobby effort. A project that should have taken a few weekends to something that took 1.5 years and had me calling academics in the middle of the night here for days on end. So it was, it quickly turned into something completely different.
Mexico City was a fairly contained island. It was just like 5 little peaks that stuck up out of the shallow lake. And over time, the Mexica have filled them all in to make a bigger, solid island.
More than just its placement on an island, the layout of the city itself reflected the Mexica's beliefs. Tenochtitlan was centered around a twin temple structure, the Templo Mayor. It set the center of the city and today is just adjacent to the Zocalo.
And the Zocalo is on one of those kind of rises. So when it would flood, it would always be above the water line. And it flooded fairly infrequently.
The pyramids were aligned so that every solstice, the sun would rise directly in the center of them. And with the streets being aligned to the temple, the city was literally aligned with the cosmos. There were several major routes through the city. Some of them were canals, and others were known as calzadas.
And the calzadas were these raised roadways that cut through the lake. And you can still see them, like there's the Calzada de San Cosme. But the Calle Tacuba was essentially the main axis of the city, and it went straight up to the twin temples of the Templo Mayor.
The Mexica had an ingenious way of working with the landscape rather than against it. And one of the examples of this was how they would control the salinity levels of the lake.
The lake isn't really a lake. It is something that's called an inland sea.
I live in Salt Lake City, which is named after the Great Salt Lake, which is an inland sea. So this is actually kind of familiar to me. Most lakes have inlets and outlets, but inland seas only have inlets. So when they evaporate off, the salinity level gets really high, and it's a very unique, harsh environment for life there.
They realized that all the mountains from the west were dumping in fresh water into the saline sea. So they started building dikes that would essentially allow that water to come in on the west, pushing the salt water to the east, and desalinify over time the whole western edge. But it's still not potable, but you can use it for agriculture.
So they would build these mounds out of the water that they would farm on top of, called chinampas.
You're getting 2 crops a year on the chinampas, so it's incredibly fertile.
Because of their shallow depth and their high salinity, these inland seas are really fragile ecosystems that can very easily be tipped out of balance.
The environment is animate. It's part of this larger animate world that you're part of, where they're thinking about, okay, we build a dike here, let's see how this environment reacts. And if it reacts badly, then we go to plan B.
I'm currently walking through Alameda Park, which is like just a couple blocks from Temple Mayor. And you wouldn't know it from today because it seems like it's downtown Mexico City. But this used to be the western edge of the island city.
If you trace Alameda Park and you walk to the Zocalo, you're basically halfway through you've crossed the island by halfway.
But that is kind of the shortest axis of the city. From one end to the other, it might be, I don't know, like a half an hour walk. And in the other axis, maybe an hour.
Now this area makes up just the city center. At the time, it was bigger than cities like Paris, London, or Amsterdam, with a population that matched.
I would not call it a utopia, but quite possibly, and this goes for many Mesoamerican cities, if you had to choose between living in an urban core in Europe versus an urban core in the Americas, probably you would have a better life and a healthier life in the Americas than in Europe at the time, in the 16th century.
In 1519, Hernán Cortés landed at Veracruz, and over the next year worked his way to Tenochtitlan. When he saw the city, he said, "It was so wonderful that I do not know how to describe it, seeing things as we did that had never been heard of or seen before, not even dreamed about." Despite his awe for the city, he worked with surrounding groups to overthrow the Mexica. To gain an advantage, the Spaniards severed the island's supply of fresh water. This upset the valley's delicate ecological balance and marked the beginning of its Spanish transformation. Thousands of indigenous residents were killed and forced to leave the city center as the Spaniards moved in.
So it becomes kind of like a donut city where the ring around the Zocalo is all indigenous residents. And the very center of the city is where Spaniards build their houses.
This is when the name changed from Tenochtitlan to Mexico City. This is the earliest known map of the city. Drawn just a few decades after the Spanish conquest, it disappeared for nearly 300 years before finally resurfacing at a library in Sweden. You can see they largely kept the layout of the city, preserving its main axes. But what they didn't preserve was its relationship with the lake.
They're all from Extremadura, and Extremadura is like California, it's bone dry. And they get to this swampy place, and they think, we do not want to live in a swamp. And there's a whole history of European medicine that's like swamps are dangerous places. There are miasmas that you'll breathe in and you'll die. So they start the process, and it's a 400-year process of draining the lake.
Check, 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 check. I want to take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an on-demand platform with modular lessons so you can learn at your own pace. They have thousands of classes across a huge range of categories. Some of the categories they have that I was interested in are film and video or design, or writing and publishing. I've been wanting to get better at motion design for these videos, so I started taking Jake Bartlett's classes on After Effects, including this one on texturing. These classes have really given me a lot of inspiration and helped me improve these videos. When I finish these motion design courses, I have thousands more to choose from, and it's going to be really useful for my continual growth and development, whether it's health and wellness or business or creativity. The first 500 people to use the link at the top of my description will get a month free trial on Skillshare. So use that, sign up now, have access to tons of classes. Thank you so much, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. And let's get back to the map of Mexico City. The Spanish rebuilt the aqueduct that they had severed, but that was about as far as they went in terms of working with the water the way the indigenous people had. During the siege, they had blasted through dikes that helped control the salinity of the lake, and unlike the aqueduct, these were never rebuilt. They also filled in the canals that had weaved through the city, and they didn't know it yet, but these were very important when it came to flooding. And both the droughts and the floods got worse when the city was no longer maintained by the Mexica. On this map, you can see the cathedral they built next to the Templo Mayor. I went into this, and it is massive.
Spaniards arrived, and they were like, we want to build these big cathedrals with big open spaces and big heavy walls. And to sustain them, we have to sink thousands of tree trunks in order to keep our buildings afloat, to make kind of pylons. So they start cutting down all of the trees in the surrounding mountains. And you're going to have massive, not only deforestation, but you're also going to have erosion. So all the topsoils come and they flood into the lake itself and start filling it up. So when the big rainy season comes, the lake can't absorb it anymore and the city starts to flood.
This all came to a head in 1629, when Mexico City experienced the worst flood in recorded history. There's a marker that shows the water level of this flood, but it's hidden up here. Let's see if I can see it. Hello. Okay, it's hard to see because it's behind that, but I mean, that means that all of this, including their umbrellas, would be covered in water. So, yeah, I'd say that's pretty bad. Pretty bad. Over the course of several days, it rained non-stop, which nearly drowned the city. It killed tens of thousands of people. And with nowhere for the water to go, the streets remained submerged for 5 years. This led to a renewed effort to cut a canal that would allow the lake to drain out of the valley.
So they basically tunneled through the mountains, and that was a project, again, that cost hundreds of thousands of indigenous lives.
From kind of 1520-ish, where the city was at its peak, to right after the conquest, the population collapsed completely and the city kind of withdrew to kind of a shriveled state. And then it would take, 200-300 years or something for the population to kind of regain its original number again.
Spanish rule wouldn't last forever. In 1785, Chapultepec Castle was built on and named after a hill that stuck up out of the lake. Before it was completed, Mexico would declare independence from Spain, and it would sit unfinished for decades, a reflection of the country's political state. Within a century, the city would be invaded by the US, torn by a civil war, and occupied by the French. But this didn't stop the city from spreading onto the lakebed. During the French occupation, Emperor Maximilian I lived in Chapultepec Castle, today part of Chapultepec Park. In 1864, the emperor ordered the construction of a grand boulevard leading toward the city center. Now known as Paso de la Reforma, it's the most visible remnant of the French occupation in Mexico City. And the draining of the lake that the Spanish had started was nearly complete. In 1900, a 47-kilometer canal was opened, and within a decade, the lake was reduced to scattered marshes and salt flats, making it no longer an island city.
And for me, the city loses its indigenous identity when the last bit of water is drained from the Valley of Mexico around 1910.
Probably at the time when they drained the lake, I thought, yes, finally, no more floods. But now, in retrospect, it's been a disaster.
Throughout the 20th century, the city flooded again and again, until in the 60s and 70s, yet another major project was undertaken called the Profound Drainage,
which is just sucking water out of the city and basically shooting it over the mountains into another valley to keep the city dry. And then they don't have enough water.
This engineering effort coincided with political stabilization and a massive boom in population, a surge that led the city to its modern shape. What were separate island cities became neighborhoods, like Coyoacán and Chichimilco. And now, right on top of the lake bed's soft soil, is a massive modern metropolis. This image is a compilation of satellite data from the Mexico City area. The darker the red means the faster it's sinking. This gray area makes it pretty clear what land has not been built on. Since the lake has been drained, a lot of the land has been settling, and a lot of the buildings on top of the land are also settling, and it's very visible on this street. The once grand Templo Mayor is now terribly canted and sinking into the ground.
So today, everyone agrees Mexico City is an ecological disaster. It floods all the time, and then there's not enough potable water. So it's this crazy imbalance with the water. And it's as if Tlaloc and Chalchihuicle, who are the Aztec water deities, are like coming back for vengeance. They're like, you were not paying attention to us the first time around.
Está temblando un poquitito. No se asusten, vamos a quedarnos. Les doy la hora. 7 de la mañana.
And it seems like we're still learning this lesson. Just in 2019, a massive airport was being constructed on this portion of the gray area. But ultimately, it was canceled because of ecological issues. I was looking at these subsidence maps and these other maps about the soil movement during earthquakes, and something became really clear. The water might be gone, but the memory of Lake Texcoco is still there. Do a little dance. I forgot to ask you guys if you're scared of heights.
I am.
You are?
Oh, I'm chill.
Guys, I don't know how to say this, but I love my job, and I'm so grateful that you guys are watching this stuff. Thank you. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Thank you.